Okay, Overtime Garage fans, we're back on this 6.0 swap for this truck. And it's been a minute, but I've been slowed up by exhaust manifold bolts. This is the donor engine. It's obviously used. But when it was delivered, it had bad studs or bad bolts, broken off bolts in the exhaust manifold here. So I was just going to take a minute and get those fixed before you put it in. It's easiest to get at them when it's out of the vehicle. So there were about 3 broken, and there are 5 that I pulled out. And that's because after I got the initial 3 out of there, I put new ones back in. These are fresh ARP bolts. Those broke as well, just putting them in. So this thing was super fragile. You can see I drilled out these guys. Some of them are well done, drilling style, others not so well. Now this one I broke a easy out trying to get it out, so that made it even more difficult. Had to drill next to it and work on it forever to get it out. The last one I did, I tried a different method on, and that was to weld a washer and a nut onto the head of it. That thing spun right out so easily. So note to self and everyone else watching, that worked way better than these other 4 that I drilled out. So there's some of the old, came off the old motor. So there's some easy outs that worked pretty well, not perfectly. There's some cobalt drill bits that are harder than the bolts that we're drilling, so those became necessity. And 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 of them broke in the process because they're really brittle, but they drill well. There's a tap for this size, which is M8 by 1.25 thread pitch. So you can see there's a bunch of tools I used to try and get these fixed up, and in the end I buggered one hole, so I ended up drilling that up to a 3/8/16 bolt instead of the stock size. So that's probably worst case scenario, is you bugger the threads and have to oversize the hole and re-tap in new threads. And well, I guess it could be worse if you just don't get the bolt out of there. Anyway, that was a real challenge. Another thing I'll say is that this manifold didn't line up, all the holes didn't line up with the head. So I ended up oversizing the holes in each of these spots so that it could have a little wiggle room. It could shift one way or the other. And I think that potentially was what was holding up some of these, when you tighten them in. They're also a strong bolt but brittle, so they were snapping right off real easily just by putting any sort of torque on there. So anyway, some messages to live by. Also fix this, all these break off if you wiggle on it too much trying to get it out of the block down here. So besides that, we're ready to drop it back in. So let's do it. Okay, here's a update on progress getting this motor back in. We're able to work our way back onto the engine mounts and hook into the torque converter and transmission bell housing. That was a little bit of a wrestling match, but we did okay. We got all the bolts back in the bell housing. There were, I think, about 6 of them. The hardest 2 are kind of up at the top, about right there, 1 o'clock if you're looking from the back forward. Actually, no, that'd be 11 o'clock. And the 12 o'clock bolt you can reach from up here. Actually, those 2 both reach from up here, reach around the intake manifold and go down from the top. Because the lower ones you can get from underneath. But just to give you a visual on the old motor. So these you can reach pretty easily, get an extension up in there, and you can get both those. This one is pretty difficult to get from underneath, so came from the top. And that's a ground bolt. This is the bell housing bolt. This is the 12 o'clock, not too bad. This one, there's no hole in the block, so you skip that. There is one in the bell housing, but you just skip that. Do these 2. Then you do that cover that goes the trans cover from underneath. I'll go under the truck and show you what we did there. You want to get these in early. This plug to this oil pressure sender. You want to get that stuff early before you start buttoning everything else up. And let me roll underneath. Got the new oil filter on there before I put it in. There's the cover. It's kind of hard too close, but there's the cover. Up in there, the 2 bolts. There's one there. You can see the other one's kind of hidden up higher. There it is. One thing I did was I connected this exhaust flange, those 3 bolts, before I had this cover kind of tucked up in there. You can see there's not much clearance, so I took those back off and then stuffed the cover up in there and then rebolted those, so watch out for that. There's a plug, there's an oil cooler connection there, oil cooler lines. Got the starter up in there early and connected the wires to the back of it first. There's the starter, 1 bolt and 2 there. There's this passenger side exhaust manifold. So got all this stuff done underneath. Got these wires routed. Hooked up the power steering pump up onto the block to get it out of the way, so we could do some ground bolts over here. Some ground wires. Got this belt on here fairly early before you start putting other things in place. You want that on first. And I don't know, pretty much going for the underneath stuff. Next I'm going to go on the upper side. Put these coil packs back on both sides. You can see I've connected a bunch of the wiring, these harnesses to the fuel injectors. I'll hook these guys up and Get the lower shroud in first, then the fan and belt. Get that in there. Might as well do the belt first. And then hook up the water lines. And put the upper shroud on, and we're gonna be really close. Ready to start it up. So, put the hood back on too. Alrighty. Alright, we got her all buttoned up. Everything's back in place up top. So now we're getting ready to turn the key, hit the key, and see how it sounds. So let's do it.